Good evening and welcome to tonight's Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 City Council meeting. Kelly, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor McCachran.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Councilor Denton.
Here.
Councilor Blaylock.
Present.
Councilor Bagley. Councilor Moreau.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
And before we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm sure many know, but the passing of Ernest Jackson on February 13th, a true icon in Portsmouth. Moving here, goes to show that it's lucky to be born in Portsmouth, and you're smart if you move to Portsmouth and make your way. She saw a whole host of things that needed to be different, and she used education as a way to make that difference. Served on the African American Burying Ground, started Seacoast African American Cultural Center, just a whole host of things, and it's truly a loss that we no longer have her with us. I learned of this as my friend, the assistant mayor, gave me a call and mentioned this passing, and I would like to pass it to the assistant mayor. You have a few words.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think that, as many of us in our community know, Vernice was the best of us. Having been a teacher in our school systems for 35 years, after relocating with her husband, who served in the Air Force at Pease. She, as the mayor said, founded the Seacoast African American Cultural Center. But before that, in '74, she founded Kwanzaa in a broom closet of the old Connie Bean Community Center. And through that, we sprouted two amazing organizations off of that, the Black Heritage Trail and the Seacoast African American Cultural Center. For me, it is an honor to talk about her to anyone and everyone who will listen, because she really did so much for our community. As I mentioned, being a teacher, influencing hundreds of young minds in our community, but for me personally, as an African American woman in our community, making sure that there was an established place for people to feel community, as every segment of our population wants to have. It's an honor for me to take over as the chair of the Burial Ground Committee, and stay true to the mission that her and several other community members set out to do now 10 years ago. She was honored by Mayor Sorrell for the Mayor's Award. She was honored by Congresswoman Hassan, and she served on so many committees throughout our state and nationally too. So just a moment, as the mayor said, of silence and recognition of the loss of a great influence, and hopefully through this loss we can all remember and think about a little bit more what we can do for our community.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are going to have the Portsmouth High School boys alpine ski team to celebrate their second straight Division I state championship at a future meeting. Tuesday didn't work out for them, but just all the congratulations, and looking forward to hosting them. I'm sure it's as equally as high as the wastewater treatment trophy that we got last year to celebrate. We have some acceptance of minutes for January 6th.
Your Honor, I move to accept and approve the minutes of the January 6th, 2025 City Council meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, we have public comment. First up is Roy Helsel. Questions on, can't read the rest. Taxes, maybe?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Roy Helsel, Middle Road. My question is why commercial property valuations went down while homeowner valuations went up? Why? My understanding is that the most commercial properties are owned by organizations, that the majority of the investors are people that do not live in Portsmouth or our state even, and property taxes shares are not being paid equally. And why is the police department larger than Dover, Concord, and Manchester when we have less population, less area to police? If I am wrong, I'd like to be corrected by somebody from city government. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Next up is Esther Kennedy on Portsmouth.
Good evening, Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. I have a lot of questions about housing. And one being, tonight you're being asked to vote on allowing an entity that will be making money off of housing to not have to pay any kind of monetary things as they go through our boards and our land use boards. And I ask you, before you vote on that, when we had the housing committee meetings here last week, there were some questions that couldn't get answered. And one of those questions that I think really needs to be answered is, what will someone have to pay to live there? And I was told that it couldn't get answered, depends on funding and all this other stuff. That's a really simple question. If they have to pay $900, then as a taxpayer, I'm like, all in. If they have to pay higher, they're making much more money, then I might not be in. And you folks, we're giving our land that we can never give to anything else in the future. No baseball fields can be built there. No softball fields can be built there. You're making a decision to give away our future. And for the right reasons, that's a good decision. But you don't have all your information yet. There were a lot of unknowns that couldn't be answered that night. And I was really disappointed. And then I watched a land use committee meeting the other night. And they're already talking about giving other land away and just giving it. No public comment. Our city assistant mayor said that it's okay. We need to get land. We need to give it to people. But we don't need to go through a public process. And a bunch of you were on that board agreed. And I find that appalling. As a citizen, I don't mind doing what's right for our people, especially those people that are low income or disadvantaged or are working for $16, $19, $20 an hour. But I'm not okay giving things away if we're giving it to a higher income person that could probably afford a place in our city. So I ask you to get all the information before we start giving away permits that the average resident, the average citizen has to pay for. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Next up, Petra Huda on various letters and requests.
Petra Huda, 2A South Street. I'm going to continue kind of on the same theme. I want to talk to you about the letter from the city attorney to the council. Action item on the city council agenda, land use review process on Sherburne. So I did have a chance to watch the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee discussion. And I'd like to remind all the people on the council and everybody on that committee This property that you're going to try to give away belongs to 22,277 people. This is city property, and this represents what the residents basically own. You are here to represent the city residents. And the decision here should be through public hearings. The basis of this whole thing, to turn this over to city manager control, which is, first of all, you need to really look at your charter and see who should be controlling this. And I'll give you the RSA that pertains to this a little later. But this is not, the whole thing is meant to circumvent the process of having a public hearing because the last public hearing was so bad. So you really need to think about this and what you're doing. Next, because I think these two are connected, I'm going to address the same thing that Esther did. Basically, it's the letter from Portsmouth Housing Authority requesting a waiver of fees. Now, I recall about 3 months ago, and just last week or 2 weeks ago, Mr. Welsh stood in this very chambers stating this project will not cost the taxpayers any money, even though in his financial projections he had $674,000 in the CIP that he was going to ask the residents of Portsmouth to pay for. The city of Portsmouth is not revenue neutral in this. Neither are the taxpayers. Basically, this property has a value of $5 million plus, foregoing of property tax on that. Plus, this is being leased, so we're going to get no benefit as residents on this. The next thing I would like you to think about on this is during the meetings last week or the week before, at this time, PHA has no design plan. They have no plan B if the financing falls through. And here they are requesting even more foregoing of revenue from the people of Portsmouth by waiving the fees and avoiding the public hearings. So you need to think about what's actually happening here and how it affects the residents of Portsmouth that you represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Next up, Jim Lee on efficiency and economy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, Jim Lee, 520 Sagamore Avenue, Portsmouth. So I know you're all aware that the Department of Government Efficiency, aka DOGE, has been in the news lately. And apparently a lot of the states think that's not a bad idea because they're thinking of forming their own departments to look into that. I think Portsmouth being a progressive city, that might be a good thing for the council to think about forming an outside committee to do that. And sometimes when you work inside an entity so closely, you get to where you can't see the forest for the trees, so to speak. So I think somebody from outside could look at some of the things that that the city hall and council and the city government do. There's some efficiency that can be had. Just for example, here's the agenda for tonight. 4 pages, but it's all printed on one side. It's a real simple printer setting to set this where you can print double-sided. So instead of using 4 sheets of paper, you can do this on 2 sheets. So I think I would submit that you might consider forming a Portsmouth Office of Government Efficiency to help us operate more efficiently and save money. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Seeing no hands on Zoom, no others rising, we will begin the public hearings and voting on ordinances. First is reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Administrative Code, Article 4, Commissions and Authorities, Section 1.413, Sustainability Committee.
Your Honor, I move to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading for the March 3rd, 2025 City Council meeting.
Second?
I'll recap again what this ordinance would accomplish. 3 things. The first is it's already a standing committee, so cleans up the language, which is turning it from a blue ribbon committee to a standing committee. The second is it reduces the number of students that would have a vote from 2 to 1. That way would help us have a quorum at the meetings. And finally, the third thing that it does is it would allow the committee to possibly have two chairs, whether they be co-chairs or a chair and a vice chair. So that's what the ordinance does, but since I'm talking about the Sustainability Committee, I just want to remind everyone that we are co-hosting staff from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services at our upcoming February 27th meeting, which is a Thursday, from 6:30 to 8:30, and an invitation is being extended to city staff, boards, the public, the remainder of the council, because a member from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services will provide an update on the status of New Hampshire's Climate Action Plan. And as we know, the ordinance in front of us has to deal partially with enacting Portsmouth's Climate Action Plan. So it would be anyone who is available to attend, they're more than welcome to attend, either in public or via Zoom.
Hey, Councilor Denton, are there any other comments? Seconded by Councilor Tabor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, public hearing, second reading of ordinance and resolution amending Chapter 1, Administrative Code, Article 16, Adoption of Fees by Budget Resolution, Section 1.601, Purpose, Section 1.1602, Procedure, Section 1.1603, Exclusion, Section 1.1604, Default of the ordinances of the City of Portsmouth.
Your Honor, Deputy City Attorney Trevor McCourt has a brief verbal presentation to share.
Yes, thank you. So over the past several months, the Governance Committee has been working with city staff to provide suggested updates to Chapter 1 of the ordinance. Before you tonight are two such suggestions really contained within these proposed amendments. The first would just make it clear that the City Council can update the fee schedule at any time throughout the term, not just through the budget process. The second update provides clear authority for department heads to charge for, to set fees for certain programming, trainings, classes, etc. The kind of the classic example of that is the recreation director sets fees for soccer camp and other kind of programming things that come up on an ongoing basis, where it would be impractical to bring such fees to the City Council on kind of that ongoing basis. So it provides that clear authority and memorializes current practices.
Thank you, Deputy City Attorney. Any questions of the council? Excuse me. With that, we'll open the public hearing.
Peter Huda, 280 South Street. So, basically, I'd like to call to your attention that this is not in compliance with your charter. So, it's section 7.10, preparation of the budget. There is a process to change this. And it's a change in the charter if you wish to do this. The process is set by the city charter, section 710, and has to be approved by the governing body. So my question to you is, especially on the second part of this, number 116603, you're giving or attempting to give department heads and the city manager control over what the city council should be doing. And basically, the city council is the governing body, and the reason that fees are approved early in the season and need to go to the fee committee is because the revenue has to be accounted for. And if we go through and look at what happened previously when things were changed without going through the process, i.e. at the dump this summer, nobody knew. It wasn't in the revenue. That is not the process. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is the first part of this, section 1160.2. Municipal fees do not include penalties, charges, and costs negotiated, imposed, or pursuant to an administrative order, compliance agreement, and other resolutions pertaining to enforcement. This includes settlement agreements. So I went and pulled your settlement agreement with Mr. Kane. Now, what you're trying to do here is pull out the fees that will be charged in lieu of building workforce housing, because it was discussed in the Housing Committee meeting and it was a mess. Nobody could understand what was going on. It got pulled out of that, and now all of a sudden it appears here. And the City Council and City Councils going forward every year are going to change this. So for developers, this is a nightmare, because you can't do your planning and figure out your costs if you don't know what the City Council or the fee committee is going to do. And basically, this is pulling away from the process again. So I'd like you to think about what you're doing here as far as that goes. And I'd like to call your attention to what I'm talking about. It's in the settlement agreement. It's in Exhibit B, and it's under workforce housing in lieu of payment. A full or partial payment in lieu of workforce housing may be provided. The fee shall be established annually by the fee committee and the city council in the fee schedule. So, in my eyes, you're trying to adjust this and not get it in the budget and not do the revenue. Plus, this takes away the public hearing again on this. So, you really need to think if this is legal and you're following the charter. And I could basically name to you the sections of the charter that were violated. Number 1, the council does the fees. Administration of the city is not by the city manager or the department heads, it's by the council. Number 14, 7.14, amendments to the budgets after adoption. If you go back and adjust this after the revenue has been calculated, after the expenses have been calculated, that is an amendment. So that needs to be adjusted. You need to think about that and look in your charter. The other thing I like to call to your attention is RSA 41.9, the establishment of fees. The town or city council does have the authority to establish fees, but prior to the establishment or amendment of any such fees, they shall hold a public hearing notice, which shall be given at least 7 days, just like everything else. So if a department head, through the city manager, without city council approval, goes through, when are you going to have your public hearing to do this legally? So there's a couple of things you need to think about there, because this is circumventing the public hearing process. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any others?
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. Petra pretty much said a lot of it. However, the history of the fees committee was to meet that RSA. I would encourage you to, as Petra alluded to, the whole wood situation at the dump and how that just got sprung on people and how it became very upsetting to people that showed up there not knowing about it. I would encourage you to really think hard on this. Now, with that said, I understand a $2 fee going through the whole process takes time, and it might be, maybe it's time to look at a way to do more of encompassing, like a certain department's allowed a percentage, so much to come through their department in fees. So that you're having the public hearing on all the fees, but maybe it is once instead of the $2. Until I saw the RSA, my recommendation was going to be anything under $200, that you have that kind of level. But unfortunately, with the RSA, you're kind of bound to having it go to a fees committee, having it have a public comment on how much the citizens are going to have to pay. So Peter is exactly right. If you read the charter, it's in there. You read the RSAs, it's in there. And I understand and respect that it kind of puts a bind on things, especially if you want to just do a little $3 fee for going to a children's event. However, you are obligated to have that public hearing whenever you're raising and appropriating funds. So I'd encourage you to look at it all and really think serious about this. And I think citizens should have a right, if we're going to raise fees substantially, to have an opportunity to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Any other public speakers? And none on Zoom. Closing the public hearing. Any additional city council questions or deliberation? Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to turn to our legal counsel because I wanted to highlight for the public that these changes were all brought forward from our legal counsel who had reviewed the legality of it. And so I want to double check with our legal counsel that indeed this does not contradict our charter or state law, these changes.
That's correct, Counselor. Relative to the charter talks about anticipated revenues, and what we're talking about here are fees, which are different than revenues. It's a different thing. We don't estimate how many fees we're collecting, for example, from land use permits in a given year. We would have no way of knowing what we're going to collect on a forward-looking basis. We don't estimate that. So there's a distinction there, and revenue is what the charter talks about, as opposed to, again, fees, which are designed to cover cost. Excuse me. And certainly, we have reviewed the relevant statutes regarding budgeting and fees, and it is not in contradiction with any of the statutes which are applicable to cities.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor Cook?
Your Honor, I move to pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the March 3rd, 2025 City Council meeting.
Second?
Any follow-up comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Next up, public hearing and adoption of resolution authorizing participation in Clean Water State Revolving Fund, SRF's loan program of up to $25,128,000 for costs related to Pease Wastewater Treatment Facility rehabilitation and rescinding the amount of $20 million in funds authorized to be borrowed for the same purpose.
Your Honor, we have City Engineer Eric Fiedler, who is going to give a very brief verbal presentation on this matter. We have brought this forward in anticipation of this hearing, so I think what you'll hear tonight from Eric is largely what we have shared, but Eric, if you have anything further you'd like to add.
Good evening. Thanks for having me up. We don't have really any more to add to this. Really, this is a good opportunity. The state engaged with the city several months ago, saying there was additional funding availability. We think it's in the city's interest to enter into this. We have the Pease project has a bunch of optional items that we weren't anticipating doing, but if there's funding available, we think eventually these costs will have to be borne by the city to maintain operations at the site. So getting reduced interest rates and or principal forgiveness on some of this work is helpful for the city. So if there are any questions, I can ask about it, but the logistics on this are basically rescinding the previous authorization to make it cleaner versus I think in the previous notification it was sort of an increase. But. So
Eric, forgive me, but for the folks that might just be coming to the public hearing, and apologies if we're going to have to go through the whole thing again, but can we just spell out what it exactly is we're doing? I know we spoke about this at the last meeting to set the stage for the public hearing, but if we can hit on, why this funding came available in the state, what this means in terms of increasing the amount that we will have potentially forgivable in the future, and what this allows us to do as a part of the anticipated needs in the future for this project. I guess, more briefly, why this is a good idea, and why did the state come to the city of Portsmouth with this opportunity?
Okay, so this project has been ongoing for quite a few years. It started out as a much bigger project for a capacity request from one of the industrial users for the Pease wastewater facility. And it sort of changed over time, and the primary driver for the project now is regulatory driven. The state, or the DES, is requiring the city to improve some of the, or increase some of the treatment capacity, and to facilitate that requires electrical improvements, and a variety of like infrastructure backbone improvements. So the city is the state has participated. We had existing SRF funding for this project. It was approximately $3 million. And this is because it's evolved over time. Their initial investment was less, and a lot of times the state will come back as you progress towards construction when they understand the quantity and the actual like magnitude of cost that goes into it. Basically, we're obligated to do the work, and as an older facility similar to Pierce Island, when you do these projects, this is an existing facility. It's 1957 was when it was first constructed, and we add on and we bolt on pieces to it over time. So a lot of times when we do these projects, we're fixing one aspect of it, but there is a portfolio of other work that still has to be done. The project focused on doing the things that are required to meet our regulatory requirements. That being said, there's other buildings, like part of this money would be used to demo an existing 1957 building on the site. It's a nuisance. We can't really do rehabilitation on it. There's, asbestos, all this contamination, some of this where we can't really use this as an ongoing facility. So what we did is, as part of our design process, we identified a couple of the other things that we thought we might be able to capture as part of the project. But as the costs came in, we used them as alternates type thing. So since the state was involved in the process, they understood that there's other needs at the site. And each time we meet at milestones, so they engage with us at the 30, 60, 90% milestones. And as the project progressed, they understood that, yeah, the costs are going to be a certain amount, and we should be able to absorb it for the base bid. But with the other needs there, they came back to us and said, we have additional funding available because other communities weren't either able to get their matches and they weren't able to meet the schedules associated with their priority grants. So essentially there's a sliding list. The state has, a list of, 50 plus or more projects that they fund, and they go from the top down, and there's a rating criteria, whether it's rates, it could be other infrastructure things, it could be energy. So there's prioritization on projects. So we were right there on the edge. And because some of the communities higher up on the list were unable to either meet their matching obligations or they either weren't able to deliver on the project, the city had additional monies available. So the state came back and said, hey, what do you need to do some of these other improvements at the site? And so we basically had alternate items that were designed and ready to go with good estimates from our engineer. So we thought that the additional funding potentially could get those done, constructed at a low cost to the city. So, the 1957 operations building, that one will have to be taken down at some point. It's good to get a low interest loan and 20% principal forgiveness on some of that work. So some of these things, when you look at it, the additional authorization of $5.128 million, the actual borrowing associated with that is actually about $600,000 because of all the additional grant and the principal forgiveness. And then because of the low interest aspect of the loan, there's additional savings over the repayment of that loan. And I think the deputy finance directors, it's approximately $177,000 of additional cost to the city, while allowing us to basically enter into this additional $5 million of borrowing capacity. So there's a lot of benefits to that. And there's timing, there's interest rates, and there's also the principal forgiveness aspect. So it's like any large facility. These things, we have, and then there's other aspects of it that we still need to hit. So it never really ends. So, and I could talk forever about this.
I'm sure. Well, thank you, Eric. That was helpful. Questions of the council before we have the public hearing. Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Mayor. Is the 20% give back, is that new or is that consistent over the years?
It varies, and it depends, I think, somewhat on the rates, but it's also, I think, most recently it's been around 20%, but I think several years ago it was maybe 30%. It sort of depends on the portions of it. And I think you mentioned at the last meeting, the energy component of it, I think 500,000 of that is at a higher rate. So there's different buckets of that, but in generalities, this would be a 20% forgiveness, excluding the energy aspect, which is 50% of the 500,000.
And just because we authorize 25 million doesn't mean that we spend that, right? If we bring the project
Not
in.
obligated to do anything at this point. So a lot of it is just gives us the authorization, and we basically choose what's in the best interest of the city from a rate perspective and all the other things.
Thank you.
Councilor Lombardi.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move to adopt the resolution as presented.
We have to have a public hearing.
We'll have to have a public hearing first, but we can, really at any time, I guess, put the motion on the floor. We have the motion on the floor, is it seconded? We'll go to the public.
Second.
All right, with that, we'll open it up to the public hearing. Please.
Guess who? Petra Huda, 280 South Street. So I don't have any problem with this. I think this is great to take advantage of the opportunity. I do have a concern about how this will affect our debt. Actually, we're taking on 5.1 million more debt. Even though, as Councilor Tabor said, we don't have any obligation to spend this, it is included in that. And we have a lot of other responsibilities for debt on the taxpayer. So I'd like you to consider that when you're doing this. The other question I would have is when the 20 million that we rescinded, and I thank you for doing that, was first presented, the description of what this was going to be used for was for repair and upgrades. It was very vague. So since we are increasing this, I would hope that before you approve this and it goes through the CIP process in the budget, that we would get a little bit more detail as taxpayers, since you're going to be increasing it by this much. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra.
Your Honor, can I just address that in the moment? We will certainly bring forth information on the costs associated as we have them, and the Finance Department would remind the public that there is no debt limit when borrowing for sewer use. Thank you.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. I would hope that when you put this through, that you can see if you can expand it to include the Pierce Island plant, to incorporate the fact that we still have an odor problem that hasn't been solved, the fact that you still have presses that are in trouble, and who knows what's happening to the bugs in this cold winter. So given the fact that we had a major corporation pull out at the Pease plant, Lonza, and they were going to pay a huge percentage of the upgrades, and they're not. I would encourage us to look at the whole big project and see what we can do to maybe mitigate some of the problems at the Pierce Island plant using these funds, and also what do we really need to happen out of the Pease plant since Lonza is not running through it at moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Any other speakers? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any additional council questions or deliberations? Well, thank you, Eric, for the work on this and the entire team to be able to be in the position to be called upon to use money that was unused by the rest of the state with no obligation to us except the opportunity to take advantage of low interest financing and the potential for larger loan forgiveness. Is a great job and a testament to your team. So thank you for that. When this comes into the CIP, would expect all of the things that we typically see in the CIP, and to remember, even though, as the city manager correctly points out, the sewer is not a subject to the debt limit, that we will take all of the considerations, the spending, when we establish CIPs, and that project starts off again for whatever the next council is at the end of the end of the fall. So with that, we're going to need a roll call vote if there's no other questions or deliberations.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes?
Counselor Tabor,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock,
Yes.
Counselor Bagley is absent, Counselor Monroe,
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi,
Yes.
Mayor McEachran.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Kelly, on to the city manager with items that require action.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have one item for your consideration tonight, and it's a memo provided by our legal department related to the land use review process for the project to be located at the former Sherburne School property located at 35 Sherburne Road. Both City Attorney Morrill and Deputy City Attorney McCourt provided content to the memo in the packet, which really offers a clear path through how to navigate in the case of the redevelopment of this particular city-owned property. So with that, I'll turn it over to Trevor, that he can talk about the nuances and why it's important to bring this forward now.
Sure, thank you. So as is indicated in, excuse me, in the memorandum, the reason this is being brought forward is the zoning ordinance doesn't provide a great deal of clarity on what process should be followed for city property that's being developed by a third party. And state law also provides some very loose framework. It's basically a notification to the planning board with an opportunity for a presentation. So that's why this proposal kind of came forward for what process the legal department would recommend this Sherburne project should follow. And the proposed process is thus: first, Portsmouth Housing Authority would bring the proposal to the Technical Advisory Committee. Technical Advisory Committee would review it, review whatever the proposal is, subject to site plan review regulations, subdivision regulations if necessary, highway noise overlay district regulations given the proximity to the highway. Technical Advisory Committee could then make a recommendation to the Planning Board, who would review the project subject to those same criteria, and then make recommendation to the city manager for this city project. This process, again, is in line with and is above and beyond the requirements contained within state law and within the zoning ordinance, and it is consistent with the City Council's vote, which empowered the city manager to enter into a contract for the development of the site at 35 Sherburne Road. And that's it. That's the content.
Any questions for the Deputy City Attorney or for the City Manager? Councilor
Thank you,
Denton.
Your Honor. The language in front of us mentions 35 Sherburne Road and only 35 Sherburne Road. One of the speakers said that this applies to other pieces of city property. Am I correct that this process only applies to 35 Sherburne Road, and in the future any other parcel of land that would be transferred would go before the City Council before it goes back through a similar process?
The motion that's in front of you would apply strictly to the property located at 35 Sherburne Road and would be inapplicable to any other city project, present or future.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Morrow?
Your Honor, I'd make a motion that we move to adopt the process for land use review of the project at city property located at 35 Sherburne Road as recommended by the legal department.
Second?
Any future discussion or further?
Further
Maybe
discussion.
don't wait till the future. Further.
No, I'd just like to say that I think this is a good idea so that we can make sure all the technical aspects of the site plan and the noise overlay district are reviewed by not only our technical advisory, but then in front of the planning board as well. And I think these recommendations will actually help formulate the project to its conclusion.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to thank the City Legal Department for bringing forward these recommendations, mostly because when I attended the discussions about the project at Sherburne Road, the main concerns that you heard from the community were around issues that would come before the TAC. So I think that it's very helpful to see that that is the process that we'd be following, that it is going to come before the Technical Advisory Committee, and we will have those discussions and make sure that the project does work for the site. So, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Look forward to hearing TAC and Planning Board on this and the opportunity to opine on the project and to give both of their recommendations back to the city manager and look forward to this project moving forward. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, we have the consent agenda.
Your Honor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Email correspondence under presentations and written communications.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, we have a letter from Craig Welch, Executive Director, Portsmouth Housing Authority, requesting the city to waive all city permit fees for the Sherburne property project. I'd wait a motion to refer to the city manager of the authority to act.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Bullock?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think with the intent of this project is to create affordable housing, so I think that waiving the fees in this case is appropriate. Yeah.
Assistant Mayor?
Thank you, Your Honor. Question for the city manager and maybe acting city attorney. In past projects, whether they be housing or not, but related to nonprofits in the city, is it common standard or common practice that we look to waive fees for nonprofits and look to relieve that burden in our community?
That's correct. We've had two relatively recent requests for waiving of fees by nonprofits that were related to non-housing projects, but this would be historically typical of such a request. And I would just point out that the request to waive would be the right of the council. I don't have the ability to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, so we'd need a motion to waive. So wait a motion to waive the fees as requested by the Portsmouth Housing Authority.
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, Kel, we're just ignoring that first motion there completely.
Okay.
Any other Councilor Tabor and then Councilor Denton.
Your Honor, thanks. Yeah, we did this with the Court Street project, and I think it's important to do it on this project too, because as it's evolved, now the school has been included as housing, so that actually makes a higher cost per unit when you blend the two together. And as we all know, competing for the tax credits, coming in with the lowest cost per unit is really the way you're competitive. So I think we can help this project a great deal, more so maybe than Court Street, by waiving these fees.
Councilor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to add that I think it was in 2018 or 2019 that the council waived the fees for the Court Street project. And that was an 8-to-1 vote, and I would like to see this be unanimous, given how successful that project was.
Still not going to get higher than 8, though, Josh. Any other comments? I don't think that there's ever been one that, when a nonprofit has requested that we have denied. I remember a couple of ones, the slate roof for once at the South Church. I think even after the council that Josh served on that waived the fees, we had also donated, I think it was granite to the project, the Court Street project, if memory serves, and needed to do so because it was over $10,000. In terms of, the idea of, what this money goes for, or goes to, when it goes to PHA. There's certainly the desire to make sure that this bid is as competitive as it possibly can be, so that we can prevent, people that have been forced to move out, that have working and can no longer live within the city. Hopefully welcome some of those that have worked in the city and been forced to relocate out. But also a project like this helps all of the other housing that exists within the city of Portsmouth. Whether that's in my neighborhood, Woodbury Manor, where there's a great new community fridge, being able to waive those fees goes directly into the opportunity to reinvest those into the properties throughout the city. And so when we talk about making investments in Portsmouth, this is one of those investments in housing because we need the people to keep the character of our town. So I will be supporting this. Kelly, does this need a roll call vote considering it's not spending any money, or just?
It does not, but we certainly can if you wish.
No, I think we get unanimous. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. So the council asked the Recreation Board to continue the conversation and look into any possibilities of creating an ice skating rink for Portsmouth, and specifically a home for Portsmouth Hockey's hockey team. The Rec Board in November voted to form a subcommittee to further look into this. We really want to do our due diligence, kind of leave no stone uncovered, and just make sure we're looking at every possibility. I will say that the subcommittee did an excellent job. They really reached out to all parties involved, were creative, tried to think of anything that the city could do. Their report we have it in the packet, kind of led down to 4 viable options. One would be the city actually putting an ice skating rink in the CIP and funding it itself, which would be very expensive. I know some other communities that they reached out to, 2 sheets of ice was $7.7 million. There's no room for that in our budget. Another possibility was filling in the wetland buffer zone, or building in wetland buffer zone around community campus or another location. I know that is not recommended, and I know I would not support building in the wetland buffer, but we listed it as a possibility. And having a private developer, Pease did offer, they have the back apron, they have 5+ acres of unused concrete, and they're looking to convert that back into field that Portsmouth could use for outdoor sports. They even offered that they would maintain it, which I thought was huge. That is one thing that I think Portsmouth should look into further, and I definitely plan on investigating as much as possible. But to do that, we would have to move all the fields at community campus and all the work that's been done there out to Pease. We would kind of be losing our recreation home. Community campus has kind of become that center of recreation for Portsmouth that the rec needs studies all said. The one in 2010, the most recent rec study, all stressed that we needed a central location for our recreation, and we've accomplished that at community campus. So I don't think that was recommended. But if I'm going to ask to suspend the rules so we could invite Scott Chandon and Amy May Court up, and they could give a little synopsis of their findings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Hello. So, Rich, thanks for that. Again, it gave an overview, so you guys have read the packet. So, I mean, if you have any questions, maybe we could start there. Happy to answer any that shed light on the options.
Councilor.
I guess I have some concern. If I'm correct, the North Apron's actually in Newington. Is that correct?
I
Because
believe
most
it
of the
is. It's I was talking to Pease, and it's on the
Right, it's in
development.
Pease, but it's not actually in the city of Portsmouth. So I guess I
They
just have.
control it.
Right, we wouldn't have any say. So I guess even though it's part of the Air Force Base and really the feds really control it, I guess I'd want to make sure there were protections as we look into this, as far as the ability for the city of Portsmouth to be able to use that land
Definitely.
legally.
Right.
He seemed to infer that that would be the case, but certainly look into that.
No other questions. Just on the, was there any discussion, certainly looks like the Department of Defense is not going to be building any hockey rinks. Is there any willingness from a land, or the, say in the Peace Development Authority, the opportunity to partner with I guess to combine some of the options here with a public-private partnership with the PDA? Was that discussed out there?
Well, let me see if this answers your question. I mean, the options for Pease to have a ice rink or some sort of sports facility would only be for a nonprofit. And so since we don't think the Department of Transportation is going to build anything, it could be something like the community college. Great Bay Community College is a nonprofit organization. So in theory, if they wanted to build an ice rink, a sports arena, they could, because they're not for profit. So if I'm answering your question, that's how it would be done.
Yeah, so they wouldn't partner with any for-profit like Edge Sports or something like that. It would have to be
A non-for-profit.
with a not-for-profit.
Okay. Would there, I guess would love to know if there was ways to, I guess, part of to have, I guess, separate entities operating, potentially the ICE versus other aspects that would be self-funded there. Would one of the, potential groups that would be looking into this have the ability to separate the functions of the public-private partnership there?
I don't think I know how to answer that question. What, could you re-ask the
So
question?
say, we'll use the example Edge Sports Group, but it's open to any, if there was the ability for them to have a for-profit portion that they would fund entirely, and a nonprofit portion that was built on the land, I guess maybe using adjacencies there. Is there an opportunity to partner with a private organization there?
Oh, you mean on Pease?
Yes.
I don't think so.
I think Paul would have to speak to that, the executive director, but my sense is they wouldn't touch it.
Okay.
But it's a good question.
I guess another, well, maybe one of the, next steps are not defined. What would you expect the next steps to be from a committee's standpoint?
Well, we felt like we were tasked just to we set out just to see what was going on, so we spoke to Edge, we spoke to Pease, just to see what happened in the past, and to see if there was any movement at all. And, we're both new to the rec board, so we also, this was kind of a history lesson for us. So we didn't set out to make any recommendations per se, but just to see what if anything has been going on these past few years. And when we spoke with Edge, basically there's nothing we can do with them because we don't have 5 acres to give them. And, that being said, he wouldn't tell us, so we don't know if they have something going on already with a private land. So that could be they could be working on something with private land. We have no idea.
Councilor Boyack, just one question, and then Councilor Boyack. So the thing that surprised me reading this was the DOD's active decision or desire, at least reading through the packet, to encourage fields. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess one of the things that kind of jumps off the page to me is if we are looking at potentially having more access to fields within the PDA, how does that affect the city of Portsmouth and how we've thought about our fields and outlays there, and if that opens up any further opportunity to knowing that that exists, to relook at any of the things that the current programming that we have scheduled to be completed or otherwise with that in mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's certainly outside of the scope of our little ice rink project, but it does seem like we stumbled across an opportunity to access more land at Pease for fields.
Councilor Boyle?
Yeah, I was just gonna, thank you both for your work, and thank Jackie Kelly Pitts as well, hope she's listening. But I think next steps, I think to continue the conversation with Great Bay Community College, see if they do have any interest. If they were, gonna have a hockey team and, we could borrow some ice time for our hockey, and that could be something, possibility. But just to continue reaching out to Edge, as a rec board, continuing to, try to encourage private landowners that might have lots of land, such as Water Country or someone else. Just that the community is looking for this, and if they want to, be a really good community member and help us solve a problem, that it is a problem we'd like to be solved.
Right, he did say that they have reached out to Water Country.
Yeah, I know I have to.
Yeah, Water Country isn't going anywhere.
But I guess the best is we're not giving up. You know what I mean? We're I am excited about the possibility of more fields that came out of this. I know Little League. We're always looking for places for the teams to practice. When you got 3 different Little League leagues and you get 32 different teams or whatever, and they all want to practice at the same time because it's been raining all week. So that could be a huge, bonus that comes out of this process. I think that would benefit Newington and all the surrounding communities, just having more athletic space, more room to play. But
Can I just say one more thing? I think that if there is a next step and you really were serious about, wanting, or we were serious about wanting an ice rink, there needs to be land.
Yeah.
And there is no land, and that's the problem. 5 acres we don't have. You guys already did a study on that, and we don't have that. If we wanted to build 1 sheet of ice or 2 sheets of ice, that could be only 2 or 3 acres. But Edge wouldn't go into partnership with us with that little amount because it just doesn't make sense for them. But that would be where a municipal rink would come into play, which is very expensive. But that would be another next step, is to locate land and way out in the future, put it in the CIP. So that's another next step.
Councilor Tabor?
Wasn't there a plan long ago to possibly have a rink behind the high school and share that parking?
Is it indoor or outdoor rink?
Indoor.
I think so. Yes. Why don't you answer that?
And Jackie Kelly Pitts is very familiar because I think she was part of that process. But yeah, there was money spent. The far back parking lot at the high school was actually built to be the pad for the hockey rink. To my understanding, it was then going to be help supported by like Budweiser or someone, and they didn't want Budweiser wanted to advertise in the rink, and then they didn't want to have them advertising around high schoolers. So it never happened. I do know that now parking is a problem at the high school. So, even when I was there in 2001, that parking lot was full every day with cars. Just saying that there isn't really room there, but something to think about.
And the other thing we discovered along the way is that you really need 2 sheets of ice if you want to have any tournaments. So 1 sheet of ice is fine, like Rochester has, and they can play games there and whatnot, but they can never have any more serious tournaments going on, which is something that's always beneficial for when you have an ice rink, is to have 2 sheets of ice like Dover has.
But still, 2 sheets of ice, something like Edge Sports Group would not be interested in 2-sheet ice.
Doesn't seem like it.
Well, they would if we give them the land. That's
Okay.
the only way any of those sports group would do it. If we give them 5 acres of land, they'll build 2 sheets of ice.
Because they also, in order for it to make money for them, they want other things in there too.
Okay, right, okay.
Yeah.
That's the,
Soccer, lacrosse.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
And then was there, I guess the things that, some of the things in great discussion here understanding how do we formalize maybe an outreach through the city manager to the PDA to understand the process of which the DOD is considering athletics. I would love to have that as a part of our master plan, if that's a near and real term initiative. Continuing to understand the private land aspect. Now I know that the 72 acres that exists in water country, I don't know if there's any specific, and I'm trying to remember if I can't remember how that is actually taxed, but if there's ways that we could look at from if there's a municipal use for a land, through a lease, if there's a innovative way through tax incentives around that, would be interesting to know about that, because ideally that would be a great spot given the proximity to the community campus and the transportation there. So knowing that there's no private landowners within the city of Portsmouth, we can't incentivize other landowners, but would like to know what that exists for the city, if there's any levers that we have, and maybe that would be a recommendation to or an ask of the planning board, or potentially we don't have land use, and so can't do it there. It's all housing now. But if there is a request of staff in terms of maybe just the planning department in terms of a request to understand what that would look like in terms of incentives that we might be able to provide. All right. Well, Councilor Buck?
I'll just finish. And yeah, through this process, Scott and Amy both reiterated, if the city of Portsmouth isn't building it themselves or giving a private builder anything, then we don't really get anything back. So just for instance, like if we were going to give Edge the 5 acres, then we would get, we would have negotiating and have bargaining power. But like you said, that would give us an opportunity to get something back.
There was one other interesting thing that we found out that you just reminded me of, is that if there was land that was adjacent to like a office park where they could share parking, this sounds like a logistical nightmare, but it's just another option. So say there was like 2 or 3 acres of public land next to a business property that had a lot of parking, that private company, if we gave them that land, that private company could work with the business property to use their parking. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's another thing to look at.
Thank you both. Exhaustive, and appreciate all the work. And again, going to continue to look at this, and really exciting to find, it's highly likely that the DOD would fund converting some/all of 43 acres to athletic fields over 36 months. That seems like ambitious, but something that would be really exciting for Portsmouth. And I know somebody that now gets to see the fields be used, from a parent standpoint. It's fantastic to see that there could be a pressure release valve there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next up, Councilor Bagley is not with us this night, so. Oh, Kate, you're going to take it.
Thank you, Your Honor. You see before you the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee action sheet and minutes, and I would move to approve and accept the action sheet and minutes of the February 6, 2025 Parking and Traffic Safety Committee meeting.
Second.
Councilor Bagley asked me tonight to introduce the changes that you're going to see in the action sheet. There are only really 3 action items that you should be aware of. One is adding a loading zone on Penn Hollow to the loading zone parking program after peak use hours. That was one that was not initially included. Moving 1 parking spot on State Street across the street and adding a 2nd parking spot. So these 2 actions both add parking to downtown. And he also wanted to acknowledge the delay that is in the action sheet to Russell, the construction delay. So you should note that as well.
Is there a motion to approve and accept the action sheet? Oh, did you,
Yes.
did I say
Sure,
that?
you did.
All right,
Yes.
so a second?
Counselor Dunn seconded.
Oh, man,
Yeah.
where was I? I was reading this thing. All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are on to the approval of grants and donations. Approval for grant for Kate Street Bridge Replacement Funding Agreement, New Hampshire DOT.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to enter into a grant agreement and any future schedule modifications with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation to take advantage of the state and federal funding opportunities for the replacement of the Kate Street Bridge.
Second.
Any discussion?
Very exciting.
It is.
It needs it.
Needs it.
Yes.
I hope they can widen it.
That might be hard.
Just a question on that, listed in the packet, but why is the number not listed as it typically is in the, on the agenda? Is that-
That's a good question, because the number may change depending on the final design of the bridge. I'm getting a thumbs up and a nod from the city engineer on that. So when I think the utilization of the 1.832 million mentioned in the packet is subject to final design numbers. And here comes Eric, because I think he's got more information.
That's an accurate summary. So, as the project evolves, the state indicated that there's potential for additional funding. And they've already increased it a little bit based on the original planning. So this is on like the 10-year bridge monies type thing. So these things evolve over time. So the assumption is that at every milestone, the city reevaluates it with the state project manager, and then it can change over time. So the thought on this is it's really only if their schedule changes, the authorization and the dollars that currently have, if there's a change to funding, that would come back for further discussion type thing.
Thanks, Eric.
All right. Councilor Lombardi.
The question is Kate Street a conduit for any utilities?
There are some underneath it, but the thought is we'd like to widen it. We'd like to put in sidewalks. There's other things that have to be evaluated as part of it. So right now, we basically sync the schedule up for the state bridge funding. So there's any of the other stuff that is associated with the bridge is still kind of in design right now. So not even in design. This agreement allows us to enter into soliciting for a consultant to help us design the bridge too. So there's a bunch of things that are still to be developed. But we'd love to move forward faster, but it's just one of those, it's on the state bridge's funding cycle, and that's just the reality.
Thanks, Eric. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? City manager's informational items.
Your Honor, we have one item, and it's my pleasure to bring this forward. As everyone knows, last week we received formal notice that the court approved of and recognized the request by both parties, the city and Sobo Square, to dismiss all actions related to lawsuits filed previously. And if Susan were here, and she's home not feeling well, but she would want to express her appreciation, and she would like to thank the entire legal office for their efforts and support through the process. And I would like to thank the council for the trust you placed in us and the support as we negotiated a successful resolution. So the stipulation of dismissal is in your packet. It really brings a nice closure to a very long chapter in the city's history. So I just want to say thank you and acknowledge that.
Well, thank you. And I will say Susan must be on death's door if she's letting Trevor sit in his seat. I'm sure she had like a 3-page, single-spaced speech presented on that. But Susan, hope you're feeling better. Appreciate the work that went into that. Glad that we can move past this part of Portsmouth's history and look forward to what we will collectively do next. With that, that's the only informational item. Anything under miscellaneous? Councillor Bagley's not here, so he usually has something, but Councillor Tabor.
Just an update on the Housing Committee. You know, this was too late for the packet because we met Thursday. But we did discuss what process we would want to use for properties that we might devote to housing in the future. And there were a couple of findings that the committee had reviewing the Sherburne process. You know, Sherburne had a lot of neighborhood interest, a lot of emotion, and the city manager decided to allow the council to make the final decision of the development partner. And in the end, the council selected PHA. But prior to that, for Lafayette School, for any of the other schools we've done, it was the council would vote to devote that land to housing, and then the city manager, having purview of property, would figure out how to do that. And the housing committee recommended going back to that process, and the city manager would implement. And the city attorney was present with us, and not feeling too good, but she hung in there for the whole evening. And she pointed out that for the next city property, let's say it's the GNOD property, the RFP process that we went through could be good for that process for the next year or two. So the city manager wanted to select a vendor from, a partner from that process, she could. And the Housing Committee also recommended POA as the highly rated partner for that next project. And that was voted 11-1.
Councilor Tabor, anything else under miscellaneous? I will simply, before, I'm not trying to draw this out, get a few texts over the course of a snowstorm, specifically asking around, when's the parking ban, what's happening. How I get my information is Smart 911. Sign up for this. It is really good. You will get, annoyingly, it will be a call. You don't have to answer it. It'll go to voicemail, and you'll get a text. It answers all of the questions that, if you think I'm in the know, it's because I got Smart 911 on there, and it gets all that information. In order to sign up so that you're getting it from the right place, please go to the city's website, look Smart 911. It will give you the correct place to go and sign up for that, and you will get all the information you need. I know there was a number of cars booted. The city gets no money for any of those. It's not some sort of revenue thing that we're looking to get. It's the exact opposite. We don't want any cars towed during a snowstorm, but the roads need to be cleared. So please sign up for that, and hopefully we've gotten our fair share of snow, and when Peter's back next week, I'm sure we'll get an update, or 2 weeks on how we're tracking.
I can actually tell you that as of through this storm, we're at 54% of the snow removal budget, which is actually less than I would have thought. And we haven't done a loadout like we did last week in over 3 years. And the loadout, which used to cost $40,000, cost about $50,000 this past week. So we're back to a bit of a normal winter.
Oh, wait, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Good night, Portsmouth.